A quick look at what we have also in South Sudan. Earlier, we also ran a story for you that the Japanese have pulled out the troops in South Sudan as well. And also, in the meantime, the U.S. has deployed dozens of troops in Somalia. What does this portend for Somalia as well? And looking at this week's East African as well, we have a side-by story there all about Yemen as well. This is on the front page of the East African, just to show you what we have there at the corner, and says that Somalia is suddenly back in the limelight with a number of high-level visits in the last weeks, signaling a renewed interest by the international community in the country that had been written off as a failed state. Among wild figures who visited the country last month were British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, amongst others as well, and also the new chair of AU as well. So what is happening in Somalia? What is happening in South Sudan? We have a panelist here. I'm holding court this morning with Professor Noah Midamba, who is the Vice Chancellor of KCA University, also is an expert on defense and foreign policy. Dr. Mumo Nzau is a governance strategist. We have also with us Judge Musamali, a security analyst. Also Dr. Mustafa Yusuf Ali, he is a conflict resolution and a national security expert as well. Let's begin with the troops pulling out in South Sudan. And we begin with you, George. Right now, what does it portend for South Sudan right now? We had also our troops pulling out from South Sudan, but I think they negotiated. We had also the new Secretary General of AU, Guterres, who was in the country as well.
Southern Sudan is going to be a long, protracted war. And I'm not seeing things changing very soon. And this is why you'll find that some countries have decided to pull out of Southern Sudan.
Yes.
And this is under the UN mission, UNIMIS. And from the history of UN peacekeeping, we've never had a mission that has succeeded in restoring peace in a country, especially as divided as Southern Sudan. This is a tribal conflict. And when we have protracted tribal conflicts, it becomes difficult to have a military solution to such a war. And basically, Southern Sudan is complicated because it's a young country, got independence the other day from the larger Sudan. And you'll find that the players that are currently fighting in Southern Sudan are the same people that were united in asking for independence for Southern Sudan. And if you look at the way things are moving in Southern Sudan, somebody is financing this war. Who is this? People are bringing in firearms. Who are these people? And the regional players, Kenya had a major role when it came to the independence of Southern Sudan. What role is Kenya playing in ensuring that there's a restoration of peace in Southern Sudan? So I feel countries like Japan feel like they're not making any positive impact by having their troops inside Sudan, because if the people themselves cannot agree to end this war, then who will come in and help them? The same problem we're having in Somalia. Look across the border, we have DRC, Congo. We have the strongest UN mission ever deployed in the world in Congo. Congo has been fighting for the last 20 years. So I believe this is out of desperation. They are feeling like we are not adding any value by having our people here. We are exposing them. The war is becoming violent every other day. People are attacking the UN camps themselves. We saw it, and this is led to the removal of the UNIMIS commander, who was Kenyan, because he was unable to protect the people. He was unable to protect the UN staff. So, I mean, the quagmire that is Southern Sudan now is actually what is forcing countries that had voluntarily contributed troops to this country to start withdrawing their troops, because probably not enough is being done to ensure that we have a quick solution to the Southern Sudanese problem.
Right. Thank you. Well, let's hear from Dr. Mumo Nzau.
Yeah, I want just to briefly disagree a little bit with George, or you rather correct. The Kenyan commander was not withdrawn because he failed to secure UN staff and so on. There were other issues going on, and the UN got it wrong. What is happening is that in the study of civil wars, there are wars that end. Wars don't always end in peace agreements and arrangement for peacekeepers to come in, as enshrined in Chapter 6 and 7 of the UN Charter. Sometimes they end with just one side defeating the other. So it's a protagonist process. And so what is happening is that originally it was thought there's an agreement. And the UN in the middle was caught wrong. It could not make a good judgment. So what is going on is, like, most likely I trust that Salva Kiir and his troops have gained enough control. They are in power, and they can hold on to it. They can cling on to power and just literally read out the Riot Act to their adversaries. The problem is that that brings the kind of thing that George has talked about, because it leads to, you know, there will be fighting. But it looks like they are in control, and there is no room for, because the elections, we expected them, that is going to take a while and all that. So I think that is what is going on. The Kiir side of things is in charge, and they are fighting off to make sure they're in control, and it's not a good thing because it's not ruled by, you know, democratic process. But that is likely the case, and now that is why other countries are, you know, what do you call, Japan. They don't have really fighting troops. They work with engineers, doctors, and they're there to help. The Kenyan troops, unfortunately, the UN got it wrong under Ban Ki-moon and all this. And so what is happening, people are withdrawing there. They are coming out, as opposed to the situation in Somalia, where the processes of post-conflict peace building are on high gear. The processes of CVE now, we are not no longer talking about CT as much as CVE now in the context of Somalia. The Jubaland MPs were here, we trained them. And we are expecting others from the other federal states that make up the Republic of Somalia. So compared to the South Sudan situation is that, you know, the logic for having a peacekeeping mission there is out of context now. And it's losing, and the world is probably not listening. Kenya raised the flag. There is no way people who are not interested in the peace, you can make them reason, and that is what happened, and the whole thing was blamed on the general. So those are some of the problems we are facing.
All right, let's hear from Dr. Mustafa.
Yeah, I think, Debarl, with the case of South Sudan, the generals have to leave. We said it before that Riek Machar, well, has been forced to leave. Salva Kiir should be stepping down, and let these two tribes, Nuer and the Dinka, not think that South Sudan is just their country and their empire. There are many other tribes in South Sudan that should be a part and parcel of South Sudan. And unfortunately, the tribal, ethno-nationalistic political dispensation that we see in South Sudan is what is going to destroy that country. And they need to have leaders who understand, and there are leaders in South Sudan who understand these issues and should be able to propel that, to lead that country, propel it to move faster forward and address those issues that have been there for a very long time. Those generals who fought in the bush, the founding fathers and mothers of South Sudan, need to take a backseat and advise, so to speak, a younger generation of leaders who understand the way to build a state, all the nuances and intricacies of governance and statecraft.
Right.
Those are the ones who might be able to lead the country forward.
All right, so was the cessation also of South Sudan before it became a state from Northern Sudan a mistake? Because we can see we thought we'll have peace in South Sudan. The conflict that was going on in Darfur and the killings, the genocide as well. Still, we're still grappling with the same issues. So we actually carried the tribal warfare from the Northern Sudan now to South Sudan.
Dubai was not a mistake. The most unfortunate thing is that this group of people should have learned all the mistakes African countries have learned. Unfortunately, they have not. Unfortunately, the situation is degenerating into probably the worst genocide we have seen in the continent of Africa, way past Rwanda genocide. Here the point. The Dinka military are uneducated lot of people. The Nuer were disciplined, educated, military force that should have been infused into the strategic development of the country. But after the, they call it attempted coup at the palace, then Salva Kiir brought in everybody and recruited them overnight. into crude military force, people who have no discipline, who have no focus, who have everything. The point is, there cannot be peace without Riek Machar and Salva Kiir settling their dispute. Now, we know that this is not going to happen. And therefore, the best thing that Salva Kiir can do for the coast of Africa, for his own country, is step down. There are enough diasporas, Southern Sudanese diaspora from America, Europe, Australia. They're scattered all over Africa. These are better, able, capable people who can come and stabilize that country. Without which, people are saying, what's the point, to waste time on peacekeeping? And arms are arriving from everywhere. There is international interest, there are regional interest. They're not helping the situation at all. In other words, Debarl, is a hopeless situation.
It's a hopeless situation. Thank you. I think that's enough for South Sudan as well. Let's drill deeper and look at Somalia as well. With the deployment of now the U.S. troops as well, we understand, we know what really happened, and the movie has been actually, captured from what happened in Somalia. I think in
1994.
93, with a Black Hawk. Yeah, Black Hawk down. So going back to Somalia, do you think they have another resolve? Or what is the dynamics with this particular new deployment of the American troops in Somalia, Musamali?
As we've said it before.
Or is it also with the installation of a new president, Farmojo, we given to understand?
I think he brought in more confidence, and people feel like they can work with him because this is a person they know, and he is a person that has been tested as opposed to the other presidents that were just coming from nowhere. But if you look at Somalia, as we've said, this is still a tribal conflict. Here it's clanism. And the Americans were there before. You saw what happened. And the intervention of Americans in this kind of war has always been disastrous. Remember, apart from Somalia, where they lost around 18 soldiers, we can go back to Beirut in 1983, where they lost 274. And you'll find that, as we've said, military might alone cannot be able to solve the problem in Somalia. We're still going back to the people. The people need to sit down, agree on how they want to take their country forward, and then come up with ways of doing this. But if we say the deployment of the Americans, but we are saying that it's a good time coming in now because Kenya is already there. We've tried to stabilize Somalia, so even though we've lost a good number of our troops in Somalia, you'll find that we also have another problem that is coming in now that the Al-Shabaab still are in control of the larger part of Somalia. Remember, we're having the Ethiopians withdrawing without any warning and leaving vacuums. These vacuums are being filled by the Al-Shabaab. So what are we going to do about this? And probably the Americans have been pumping in a lot of money in terms of military aid, in terms of training, and probably they're not seeing value for their money. This is why now the Trump administration has decided to deploy troops on the ground and see if they can push this war forward. Remember, he asked a very difficult question when he said, we've been putting in money in Somalia for the last 10 years. Yes. What has come out of this? And I believe he's now putting action into his words by bringing in the troops. So the success of these troops on the ground is yet to be seen. Let them come. We see what they've come up. Let's look at their strategy and see if it's going to work for the Somalis. But I still believe there must be dialogue in Somalia for it to have a peaceful solution to the current conflict that is running on.
All right. And thanks, somebody really concurs with you. We have Lilly W James. She's saying that it's good to know the President Donald Trump is supporting the terrorism fight course in Somalia. We had bugbears and fears that they're going to, pull out, their funding and their support as far as fighting Al-Shabaab is concerned in Somalia. Dr. Mustafa.
Well, Debarl, in this case of asymmetric warfare, having boots on the ground, particularly American boots on the ground, have both pros and cons. I believe more of cons. The United States of America is a powerful country with significant resources. And those resources might be used better in terms of equipping, training, facilitating, increasing support, intelligence gathering, drones, and and the general equipment that AMISOM forces do need to fight Al-Shabaab in Somalia. Having boots on the ground, well, unless he's going to put in 100,000 boots on the ground, fighting this kind of war is going to be very challenging for America by just having a few dozens of soldiers on the ground. I think AMISOM can do a much better. The troop contributing countries to AMISOM can do a much better job in actual fighting and pushing Al-Shabaab from territories that they are still controlling and collecting intelligence. The United States of America and other Western powers are very good at the equipment that they have, modern, sophisticated intelligence gathering equipment, ways and means, training, is something that they need to deploy. And of course, financing AMISOM to mobilize more than the current level of troops, about 20,000 that they do have there. And then secondly, Dr. Mumo Nzau did allude to this. We're moving a little bit away, not away, but supplementing counterterrorism with countering violent extremism. And that seems to be a challenge that is going to be very present in Somalia for a very long time to come, and is going to affect us here. And it's very important that CVE and PVE countermeasures are put in place and are funded properly and adequately to prepare Somalia for a proper takeoff.